Oda has just revealed one of the most important One Piece characters we've never met, a certain mystery woman with deep connections to a certain man. He's also detailed the global conspiracy to overthrow the world government involving CP9, as well as the, frankly, embarrassing secret of St. Marcus Mars, the reason why Fujitora is even more powerful than we thought, a startling fact about one Golden Lion Shiki, a less than startling fact about butts in general, and most shockingly, this is the former warlord of the sea who was defeated by Port Castiace before One Piece began. And he has a big connection to an even bigger Emperor of the Sea. All of this comes from the SBS of volume 109, and this is an unusually stacked volume. I always say that the SBS segment's pretty much mandatory reading because they contain so much information that really should be in the manga, and that has never been more true than it is today. So the following comes to us courtesy of Arta from the Library of Ohara, as well as Pewpiece and the Will of Marco on Twitter, who graciously translated all of the it. And we're going to begin with our brand new old Warlord of the Sea. So, according to Eiichiro Oda, this is Hanafuda. He has a hobby collecting Zoan-type devil fruits, particularly ancient models, and it is said that he was planning something, but we don't know what became of him. His height is 5.14 meters, and he was known as the, quote, king of lizards. So Hanafuda was almost certainly an ancient Zoan user, and with the epithet king of the lizards, I reckon that he had a Tyrannosaurus rex fruit. Rex being Latin for king, which I know because my mother forced me to go to a private school that taught Latin, and as a result, I get called elitist by people who could learn that very same thing by reading the second line of Wikipedia. But we should definitely address the elephant in the room. So Jack, could you please get out of the room? I don't even know how you got in here. Okay, now that he's gone, we should say that there is a definite Kaido connection here. Hanafuda's goal of collecting Zoan fruits, specifically ancient Zoan fruits, aligns with Kaido's desires pretty perfectly, and it gives us two possibilities. The first is that Hanafuda was a rival of Kaido, kind of like Gecko Moria was, except Hanafuda was in an arms race to gather as many Zoans as he could to eventually become capable of opening a far more popular zoo than Kaido ever could. But I actually think it's much more likely that Hanafuda was working for Kaido. He had infiltrated the Seven Warlords on Kaido's behalf, which there is some precedent for. Doflamingo didn't infiltrate the Warlords for Kaido, and he did have his own ambitions, but he was primarily working directly for Kaido to produce the Smile Fruit and such, which fit perfectly into the Beast Pirates naming scheme, as Doflamingo's alias was Joker. And you may or may not have noticed that most of Kaido's crew are named after playing cards like King, Queen, and Jack. And almost all of the lower ranking members are named after actual card games like Gin Rummy, Solitaire, Speed, Poker, etc. And Hanafuda also fits into this naming scheme, because Hanafuda are a type of playing cards. The same type of cards that were Nintendo's first ever, slightly illegal product back in the 1800s. And so Hanafuda could be the guy responsible for why most of the Tobi Roppo have ancient Zoan devil fruits, especially characters like Ulti and Page 1 who were taken in by Kaido as children, with of course the exception of Diaz Drake, who acquired his Allosaurus fruit all on his own and used that as a bit of a handy in for the Beast Pirates, because that's the first question Kaido asks whenever someone wants to join his crew. Alright, drop your pants and show us your dinosaur. This also makes me ask the question of which warlord replaced Hanafuda. The ones that predate him are Boa Hancock, who is the longest known serving warlord, having acquired the position 13 years ago. Although we know that Gecko Moria was already a warlord 12 years ago, then Jinbei joined 11 years ago, and Doflamingo blackmailed his way into the system 10 years ago. So we're looking at Crocodile, Mihawk, and Kuma. And it's definitely Kuma who replaced him, because Ace defeated Hanafuda 4 years ago. And 4 years ago also happened to be when Kuma agreed to become a warlord in exchange for Bonnie's treatment. So in a weird way, I guess that Kuma and Bonnie can thank Ace for that opportunity. I mean, Bonnie can't at the moment, but I'm sure that Kuma will be seeing Ace very soon if he hasn't already. Although going through the history of when everyone joined the warlords, it seems highly likely that there were probably around at least 4 or 5 others that we don't even know about. Ones that have had to be periodically replaced year after year. And that might be why Fujitora was ever so fed up with the system. It wasn't just Crocodile, Doflamingo, and Blackbeard, but historically this whole system has been nothing but one failure after another. Speaking of Fujitora, we have some massive throbbing news for him as well. Or more accurately, we have some news about his sword. It now has a name. It's called the Yakuza Kassen, which means Yakuza firing line, and is almost certainly named after the film Shinheitai Yakuza Kassen, which starred Shintaro Katsu, the Japanese actor who Fujitora's design was inspired by. And this I did not expect, but it is one of the supreme grade Meito blades, meaning that it carries the same rank as Mihawk's Yoru, Whitebeard's Naginata, the Shodai Kitetsu, and Roger's Ace. There's only 12 supreme grade blades in the world, and now we know 5 of them, and also we know who made Fujitora's sword. It was Fugetsu Kisaburo, who is not the person you're seeing on screen, no. This is Fugetsu Omusubi, who you might remember spent some time with Yamato in a cave before going off to die fighting Kaido. And the Yakuza Kasen was made by Omusubi's ancestor, because all of the greatest swords were made hundreds and hundreds of years ago. They literally do not make them the way they used to. But now for a colossal discovery regarding CP9. There's always been this big gap in their story between leaving the world government during their cover story, and then each and every one of them somehow becoming part of CP0 post-time skip. This is a story I've always wanted to know, and I never thought it would be anything huge, but mate, as it turns out, they were key figures in a global conspiracy to overthrow the world government. So this is their story as told by Oda. After CP9 lost at Enies Lobby, their cover story took place. CP9 was blamed for failing the Enies Lobby mission by Director Spandam, and they all disappeared somewhere. This was the beginning of their training to become even stronger. Just as a side note, something I love about CP9 is that they are incredibly rare villains who were not broken by Luffy and the Straw Hats, despite the fact that their defeat at Enies Lobby was more humiliating than publicly admitting that you liked anime in the early 2000s. But CP9, they took that and they said, you know what, kings and one queen, we were the problem. We were too weak and we're going to fix that. Which is why when Rob Lucci returned during Egghead Island, it was astounding that he was exactly the same because Luffy had failed to break his leopard will. It's pretty damn impressive, unlike Spandam, who simply continued to succeed via nepotism. And with that, let's continue the tale. Meanwhile, Spandam somehow rose to become the director of CP0 thanks to his father Spandine pulling the strings. But this is where Rob Lucci and the others discovered a new plot by the big wigs of the underworld and the former level 6 prisoners who were in league with Spandine and destroyed this organization to stop their infiltration plan. As a result of this incident, Lucci and the others returned to being intelligence agents as part of CP0. Spandine lost his authority and ended up on his sickbed, so Spandam ended up becoming Luffy's Gopher boy. And what I love is that the Wikipedia page for Gopher translates this for the non-American English speakers, and it translates it as a similar job to that of a peon in Commonwealth countries with a citation needed, which I think is a bit outdated. We don't employ many peons these days, which is a shame because the term applies brilliantly to Spandam. And look, there is a lot going on here. So firstly, Spandam's father Spandine was corrupt even by world government standards because he was working with the underworld, meaning the industries led by the underworld emperors, as well as former level 6 prisoners of Impel Down. And it seems like he was trying to place them within the world government to flood high-ranking positions with those loyal to him or loyal to the emperors. But this is just, it is beyond crazy because you got to think, what was the end game here? Was Spandine trying to maybe not overthrow the world government, but eventually have a base strong enough that he could install himself as an Elder Star or something? Or was he just acting on behalf of the underworld emperors who were planning to commandeer the world government for themselves? Because they were going so far as to infiltrate CP0 by installing Spandam, so they were going right for the head of the world government. I have no idea what this mad lad was thinking, but this is the sort of event that I think needs to be told in some way. Like a novel, a spin-off manga, or a miniseries. Just something, because Spandine had the ambition of a true villain here, and he was doing it entirely through political and bureaucratic means. Which, you know, probably not the most exciting story to tell in a Shonen Punch fighting manga, I get it. But instead of pacing the anime really slowly, I would want to see more stories like this. Have Toei adapt the stuff that we don't even get to see in any capacity. Like the backstory of Eustace Kid as well, and maybe even the family tree of Zoro. There is so much One Piece content that theoretically exists out there and can be taken advantage of that isn't. And we're not done with CP9 just yet, because we have news regarding Alpha, the nurse secret agent who appeared in Bonnie's flashback and who was defeated by a 10-year-old girl. Now Alpha looks exactly like Califa, and that's for good reason, because Oda has revealed that Alpha is the younger sister of Califa and another daughter of Lasky, one of the former CP9 agents who was present on Ohara during Buster Call Day, which would be the name of the National Day of Memorial observed on Ohara if anyone but Robin had survived it and remembered it. But this brings up the interesting dynamics of CP9. Most CP9 agents are orphaned orphans taken by the world government to their secret agent training island. And the reason for that is because it is so much easier to mold obedient killing machines when they have no emotional attachments to unnecessary things like, say, parents. But Lasky has been very attached to at least one woman, so much so that he created 2 spawn, and as is tradition with biological fathers in One Piece, dumped his own child onto someone else to raise, giving the world government 2 more nepotistic secret agents. Which makes me wonder if Califa and Alpha even know about each other, because they were raised entirely separately. Alpha was part of CP8, so she wasn't trained on the special CP9 island that Califa was. And just because we've had far too much actually relevant information in this SBS so far, Oda decided to include the following question for balance. Question: draw men's butts. Sorry, but please draw it, kneeling down. Please draw the butt of every male Straw Hat crew member, I beg you. To which Oda responded that he will not draw them because he's not interested in them. But this is a reference to one of Oda's side quests during Egghead Island, where he made a conscious decision to master the quote erotic art form of drawing female butts. Those are his words, not mine. And that's why none of the female characters are wearing pants at the moment on Egghead Island, because it would make the upskirt drawings much more difficult to pull off, and therefore much more difficult for Oda to pull off. Echiro Oda is a very open pervert, we all know it, let's not pretend. And to complement this, we also have another butt-focused question, this time involving very old men. One reader asked Echiro Oda why St. Marcus Mars is always standing when we see the 5 elders together. A very valid question, because there's plenty of seating available, especially around Topman Walkuri, but I suppose that might not be desirable, because I imagine that he smells a lot like the literal pig he is. The actual answer is even stupider than I could have predicted though, which is that Marcus Mars always forgets, and this is a direct quote, Marcus Mars always forgets his homework, so he is punished as a child would be by standing in the hallway. So that's the comically canonical reason why Marcus Mars is always standing. Because he is the laziest Elder Star, and once he clocks off for the day, he ain't doing shit. And I promise that we'll get back to the actually relevant stuff soon. There's one more big thing to say. But I have to flag this because this is one of the weirder things that I've ever seen in SBS, which is that someone has written in and left a Yelp-style review for the Egghead Island Vega Cola. It reads as follows: the moment you drink it, as the pungent feeling of ginger hits in, and the aroma of apples and lemons spread through your mouth, that word, and ginkgo leaf extract activate your brain so much that the ideas won't stop rushing out. Which is a pretty damn positive review. So this is a type of cola that enhances thinking, and may even be directly responsible for how the Vegapunks are always so full of ideas. The lesson here being that it's not about natural talent or hard work, it's all about which drugs you use as well as how and when you use them. Alright, so getting back to stuff that you should probably take a bit more note of, a reader asked the very common question about Golden Lion Shiki, and whether or not the events of One Piece Strong World are canon. And Oda replies that he doesn't worry about making the films canon. He could try and find a way to make them fit if he wanted, but then he would be worried about readers being obliged to see the films. Which is pretty big news because that means we'll probably never see a canon One Piece film put into production. So the next time something big happens, like say revealing that Shanks has a daughter, let's just remember that this is all fiction within an already fictional universe and maybe don't get too excited. But Oda then said something that piqued my interest, which is about Shiki's Devil Fruit. If you're unaware, Shiki is a canon character, and he was someone who Oda was going to use in the story before making him the main antagonist of Strong World. And here Oda says that if Shiki wasn't used as a movie villain, then he never would have been given the Fuwa Fuwa no Mi, the float fruit. This is apparently because Oda has a rule not to include characters who can fly freely, because it breaks the premise of the world and the need for all of the sailing, which is why Oda set a hard limit on flying fruits during Alabasta by having Pell say that there are only 5 flying types known to exist. And this is a rule that Oda has abused even harder than Bartholomew Kuma, because we're now up to about 20 flying fruits at least. We're at the point where even characters like Batman can fly. His Smile Fruit powers sprout wings from his butt, and he is capable of that legendary power that Oda had reserved for only the goodest and rarest of boys. And then Oda confirms that Shiki's Devil Fruit is canon, but it's accidental canon. It was not the intention to make him a floaty man, but it's what we have now. And now for the big news, Oda has revealed a mystery woman after being asked the following question. Hello, Odachi-san. Granny Nyon said that the Empress from 2 generations ago died from falling madly in love, but the Empress from 2 generations ago was Shakuyaku. Why did Granny Nyon lie about this? So this is a mistake that I've made before. The history of the Kuja Empresses can be a bit confusing because we do know 3 of them. Boa Hancock, Shaki, and Elder Nyon, also known as Gloriosa, former member of the Rocks Pirates. But there is and has always been a 4th if you know how to read, which I haven't always. I had to learn. And so Oda starts his answer very appropriately. This is a matter of reading comprehension. It's not a lie. What she's referring to in this line, the Empress from 2 generations ago, was talking about the love sickness that she also got. In fact, in the past, the Empresses and warriors of this country have always died from this sickness without knowing the true reason. But in recent years, Granny Nyon and the others seem to have avoided death by going overseas. And Oda then introduces us to Toritoma, named after the Tritoma flower, who was the Empress of Amazon Lily immediately prior to Boa Hancock, and who unfortunately died of love sickness, the condition that Hancock was struck with after meeting Luffy. And so if you wanted to put all of the Empresses in a nice neat little line, and I do, you go Gloriosa, who abandoned Amazon Lily to join the Rocks Pirates after being hit with love sickness, after which point Shiki became Empress, and also eventually fled the Empire, likely due to love sickness inflicted by Silver's Rayleigh. Then Toritoma took up the mantle, and to her credit did not abandon the nation, but did end up losing her life. And then finally we have Boa Hancock, and well, you know her story. So the question now becomes, which notorious man is responsible for striking Toritoma with this sickness and in turn causing her death? And what I'm seeing online is, predictably, a lot of people jumping to Monkey D. Dragon because we have a rule, right? Whenever a new woman is introduced in One Piece, they're either immediately scouted for new crew member if they're young enough, or labeled Luffy's mother if they're old enough. I don't think that Toritoma is anyone's mother though, because remember, she died. So whatever life-saving love injection was required was not administered in this case. With that said, I would say it has to be a figure we know about. This wasn't just some guy. It takes something very special to infect a Kuja Empress, someone whose name will be remembered by history. So maybe Toritoma fell for Shanks, but he was already in a committed entanglement with Makino. I use the word committed very loosely there because he's never actually with her. But Shanks, he's not a bad candidate, because Boa Hancock fell for the future Pirate King, Shiki fell for the first mate of the previous Pirate King, and Gloriosa fell for someone in the Rocks Pirates, which was also teased in this SBS. Oda has somewhat clarified that the man Gloriosa was pursuing was part of that crew, which narrows our choices down to Whitebeard, Rocks, and an odd contender, Kaido. And if you want to know why we can't dismiss Kaido, I've made a whole video about Gloriosa's bizarre love life, which you should absolutely check out next by clicking the thing here.